Hey, everybody. My name is James White, and welcome to STARKADE Radio, Episode 2. Our second. We lasted 2 damn episodes, and they haven't shut us down yet, so everything is going good. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here in this Twitter Spaces, and if you're watching the rerun on the STARKADE Discord, thank you very much for checking that out. As I said, my name is James White. I go by Signalnoise on Twitter, and I am the CCO, Chief Creative Officer of STARKADE, the PFP project. And you can check us out at STARKADE.com to see everything we have built and where we're going. Check out our star map. And if you haven't dropped by the Discord, drop by discord.gg/STARKADE, because we have a lovely community that is in there talking trash about me as we speak. But it's all in good fun. So again, thank you all for being here, gang. A little bit of housekeeping. Before we get into our special guest lineup, we have the Broadside crew in the house today. Vector Meldrew and Matt Mason are going to be talking about the Broadside project that is taking the world by storm. I can't wait to chat about that with those guys. But before we get to that, I got a little bit of STARKADE news and updates to talk about. So first and foremost, we got recruiter profiles are on the way. We are going through the final little build to make those things run real swiftly and real smoothly for everybody. But the recruiter profiles on STARKADE.com should be live likely next week. That is what I'm getting from the dev team. So we're looking like we're in the final round, and we're going to have those things updated and shareable. These will be shareable recruiter profiles. So you can send a link to somebody and they can check out all the STARKADE fighters, all the items and power-ups and badges that you've earned. And you can basically brag up your arsenal that you're going to be bringing into the Legion Arena when that goes live. So that's really, really exciting. Recruiter profiles coming real soon. And also, we had our warehouse opening a couple weeks ago. And thank you so much for everybody for picking up the crates that you did and getting those items and power-ups. And we have been talking about that and how that all went. So we built the warehouse to be robust. Moving into the future, we wanted to future-proof this thing because we didn't want it built for a small community. We wanted it built for a large community. But as a result, because of the numbers, a lot of you have been getting a lot of commons and uncommons. And we have been watching and we have been listening. And we've been having discussions and meetings behind the scenes about how we can incentivize holding multiple commons and uncommons in your wallet. So rest assured, if you picked up those crates and you got 5 pulse grenades like I did, we're going to incentivize holding 5 of the same item. So pay attention to that, and we'll come at you in the next little while with an incentivization program, to use some of those $10 words. And we're going to take care of you, so don't worry about that. And next week on episode 3 is going to be our storyline deep dive. So we're going to go into the backstory of STARKADE and the narrative and all the wonderful writings of John, our chief narrative writer. So he might be guesting on the program, and we'll see. We'll be talking about all of the lore and rich story that has been gone into our project since the beginning of this year. Really, he started in 2022, and he is writing right up until this moment. So next week is going to be story time for STARKADE. So be sure to check that out. It's going to be the same time, same channel as we're talking about right now. So a little bit of a breeze through on what people have been working on this week. I drew I go analog, I like my analog drawings. I did a pencil drawing of a young flash of lightning with his grandfather, the Howl. If you want to pop over to our Discord, I have that in our sneak peek channel. You can check out those pencils. And I'm also working very excitedly on the Legion Arena title screen. So the first thing you see when you open up our Legion Arena game when it goes live is going to be this screen. And I'm working on the big action-packed illustration for that, which is incredibly fun and incredibly intimidating, as you can imagine. So I'll throw in some sneak peeks along the way. I got some stuff to show, so we'll see how that goes. Our CEO, Naomi, has been working on the Legion Arena UI. That's ongoing. She's also working on a big marketing plan with John, because that's one of the things we want to ramp moving up to Legion Arena and its launch. Lucas has been working on some Champions Corner updates, so that's going to be coming real soon. And he has ongoing testing with playing Legion Arena build and looking at the game UI and experience, which is all very important, again, leading up to that Legion Arena release. John is, of course, writing. He's developing story, and he's working on that marketing plan with Naomi. Dan and Patrick. Dan is our lead back-end developer. Patrick's our lead front-end developer. And they are working on the database development to help support our recruiter profiles. So they're going to get everything running nice and quick. And this will benefit the loading of all recruiter-based data quicker and help support our future infrastructure. So those are all wicked updates, and Dan and Patrick are working real hard to get that up for next week. Robert and Jack, our community team, they're going to be handling the raffle for Broadside on Thursday. That's tomorrow. It's going to be a 48-hour time frame. So be sure to pop over to our Discord, and that's discord.gg/STARKADE, and look into all the details regarding the Broadside collaboration, the hot Broadside collaboration between Broadside and STARKADE. We're going to be locking knuckles, man. It's going to be awesome. And DC, our community consultant, who is behind the scenes working at the STARKADE Twitter account right now, running this Twitter Spaces. Big shouts to DC. He's working with Jack, and they've been researching marketing potentials and working on overall strategy with the team on long-term marketing. So that is incredibly important, and big shouts to DC and Jack for taking on that incredible task. A little bit of community before we jump into the Broadside chat. We had one of our megastars change hands. Nix has landed in the ownership of Mar1. Mar1 is one of our loyal Starkadians in the Discord every day, and managed to pick up Nix, one of our megastars. So Mar1 is now the proud owner and is earning credits as we speak, because we all know if you bring your STARKADE fighters into the training ground and you train with Nix, that means Mar1 is earning a wage of STARKADE credits. That's the benefit of holding a megastar. So big shouts to Mar1, and big congrats on picking up a megastar, one of 15. Big shouts to Mar1. Speaking of Mar1, a little reminder: Mar1 has a collection, The Adventures of Hazel and Atwood. It's a collection of digital banners on the Ethereum blockchain, consists of 1,000 scenes uniquely generated from over 400 traits. The mint date is November 15th, which is the same day as Broadside. And he was lovely enough to give us an early access giveaway for STARKADE holders. So pop over to our Discord, again, discord.gg/STARKADE, to check out any details on that, and you can visit that collection on the web at 2woodies. That's number 2, woodies.com. Big shouts to Mar1. All right. Woo, we got through all that, gang, and we are moving on to our next segment, which I am incredibly excited to introduce Vector Meldrew, an artist, VJ, and creative, and Matt Mason, a decentralized technology veteran. And I started writing a little bit of an intro for these guys, and looking at their website. I have your website up right in front of me here. If anybody wants to check out Broadside right now, it is broadside.com, BR0ADS1DE, which rolls off the tongue, fellas. Well done on that URL. But check out broadside.com, because I got this website up in front of me and it's screaming into my eyeballs right now. And I was going to write an intro for you guys, but I would rather you guys introduce yourself, because the list of people and places and companies that you have worked with is astounding. So everybody, give a big round of applause for the crew behind the mighty Broadside. This is Vector Meldrew and Matt Mason. What's up, fellas?
What's up? Hello. Thank you for that great intro. That was great, James. And really good to be on this space with you. I feel like our projects are kind of aligned in so many ways. So it's good to do that digital fist bumps between the two communities, because they're both projects that have good art and storytelling at the core, and we're definitely watching very closely with what you guys are doing with the game mechanics and the different way you've structured all your drops. It's really inspiring, so thank you. To go on to intros, I can intro myself and then maybe Matt will jump in. But 20 years ago was when I met Matt. It was at the same time I started my creative career in the music industry. There's a funny story going around the Broadside community that I was a glass collector and I got set fire to a bin, and then I walked into a music magazine office and told them I could design a website, and they hired me with my previous CV being previously set fire to a bin. And since then, we went on a bit of a journey. We created animation series together, advertising campaigns. I went to kind of go more solo in the music industry and work as a VJ and go and tour at festivals doing live visuals, and then went through the kind of the more commercial route, working on computer games or films or advertising campaigns. And I founded a production studio doing all those kind of things as well, and working for clients such as Blockchain and Adidas, Nike, the James Bond franchise, and a few others. And then in the past few years, just been completely obsessed by NFTs and just gone fully into that world. And then within that, it just seemed like this world is the perfect world to launch Broadside, and a better way than the previous system of developing IP and being able to do it in a decentralized fashion, which is very much true to what our story is about. So here we are at the end of pretty much a long journey of developing this project, actually, for the last 10 years, and a collaborative, creative relationship of 20 years between myself and Matt and Charlie, who couldn't be here. Don't know where he is. He's probably in bed. And yeah, that's probably it in a nutshell. I'll hand over to Matt.
Yeah, thanks, Vector. James, thanks so much for having us today. Really appreciate it. Yeah, look, I can confirm that Vector Meldrew definitely got fired for setting fire to a dustbin and stealing peanuts at that dog racing track. But who wouldn't hire someone like that to design their website? I mean, it's not like we had a choice. But he was also a brilliant flyer designer, and he was just a really brilliant designer. And when Vector walked into the offices at Rewind magazine, where I worked with Charlie and the rest of the team, and we were just like, all right, like this kid might set fire to things, but we kind of like that about him. We think that's going to work here. He's obviously very talented. And yeah, over the years, just like watching Vector just do so much amazing stuff, man. Yeah, it's just been amazing to work with him on so many things. And Broadside especially, just it feels like it's just the absolute highlight of my career to get to work with Vector on this thing in particular. But look, like Vector, I came from the music world. Was a pirate radio DJ growing up in London, and very involved in raves and running record labels and club nights and all that good stuff around sort of garage and grime and dubstep music at like the turn of the century in London. And yeah, I helped start Rewind magazine. What Vector didn't say is he did get fired for setting fire to the dustbin, but the site he built became one of the largest music websites in Europe, and the magazine was the largest music magazine in the UK. So like he smashed it. It was just amazing to be part of that. But then from there, I was just obsessed with, from pirate radio, I was obsessed with the idea of decentralized technology, with creatives being in control at the edges rather than having to sort of go through a sort of centralized repository. I worked at Warner Music for a while, and that really helped me see the other side of, pirate radio was the most decentralized way to do creativity. Warner Music was kind of the opposite. And so that really sort of helped me sort of think about, all right, well, I just want to help creatives do things that feel a bit more like pirate radio. And that sort of got me to NFTs, because that's the sort of creative moment I feel like we're having here. Between NFTs and pirate radio, I did a few other things too. I was CMO at Kraken, the cryptocurrency exchange. I've run an innovation lab for Sony Pictures out in LA. I was the chief content officer at BitTorrent over a decade ago. And BitTorrent was when I really got into, decentralized tech as we know it. And, just as Bitcoin was really ramping and got very interested in crypto very early. But then when I saw NFTs, I think it was CryptoKitties was the first thing I saw. I did a project with them when I was at Kraken, and was just like, wait a second, this is the killer app. This is going to be as important as MP3s were in sort of showing the world why the personal computer was an important idea. And I don't think we're there yet with NFTs. I think we haven't hit that moment with the wider world yet. They're all kind of scratching their heads still, but seeing more projects coming out that are really pushing the envelope, we're getting there. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of things with NFTs aside from Broadside. I'm chief content officer at Palm NFT Studio. We work on a number of different sort of pretty large scale NFT projects. We do a lot of stuff with DC Comics. Shout out to all the back cows in the audience. And also we do stuff with Universal Music Group. We did the Currency project with Damien Hirst, and we're helping build out a layer 2 called the Palm Network, which is a purpose-built L2 on Ethereum specifically for NFTs that we're pretty excited about. So yeah, lots going on, but Broadside for me has just been You know, it's been a labor of love. It's just such an amazing project to work on with Vector.
Wicked. Thank you so much for those intros, guys. You know, just by reading the website, again, I got your website screaming in my face right now. And I really didn't glean that you guys had known each other for so long. You know, like that's such a positive. You know, when you know, working on an NFT project can bring together people that have known each other for a long time. Because that's exactly what happened with STARKADE. Through Naomi, we built out, and myself, we built out our team based on our friends and the talented people that were in our lives. But it really does seem like, looking at your bios that are on the website and looking at all the people that you guys have worked with, it must be, you know, and I'm kind of speaking from experience as well, it must be an amazing feeling to know or to feel that, you know, as being friends as you guys are and having been working with the people that you did, NFTs is a perfect home for the both of you, right? Like, it really does bring together, it's a culmination of all of the things that you guys are not only good at, but what you're interested in, right? And that all seems to be coming together with Broadside. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely, like, sorry, Vector, I saw you jumping on.
No,
but
go.
All right. Well, like, I think 2021, I used to joke with people. I'm like, this is proof to me that we are living in a simulation. Because I've been trying to do decentralized creativity my entire life. And the 10 years before that, like a BitTorrent, I've been trying to say, no, creativity needs to be at the edge. And all of the labels and all of the studios and just everyone would just be like, yeah, but, you know, Spotify, streaming, Netflix. Like, yeah, okay, but it's not good. Like, it's not. We're going into a cul-de-sac. Culture is developing more slowly in more fragmented ways, because we're not doing things in this sort of more decentralized way. You don't get as much experimentation. There's not room. If you're using, you know, the Spotify UI is a very different place from pirate radio. You know, there's not a place for Spotify and Netflix and all the rest of it, but it's just like, oh man, no one knows what I'm talking about. And Vector and I would talk about this, and then when NFTs happen, it's like, oh shit, we're really gonna do this. Like, all of us at scale, we're gonna create a different type of ecosystem for creativity. It was just like, I still can't believe this is happening. It's the most amazing thing I've ever been part of, including pirate radio.
Sorry, Vector, you're gonna thank you for that, Matt. Awesome. You're gonna jump in there, Vector?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think we both went through a period in the last few years, both collectively and between the two of us, and also independently, whereby we were as side projects, or maybe sometimes more front and center projects, but developing intellectual property and going around the houses, going to the streaming platforms, going to like various places in Hollywood, pitching ideas. Found this process very slow. And I've said it before, the best equation that I would equate, the best analogy I'd make is death by 1,000 cuts, in the way that your idea just constantly gets slashed and slashed and slashed. But it was we kind of I think that beginning of 2021, there were a bunch of rejections that happened, and it almost felt quite dark and bleak. And we'd, you know, invested time and money and resources into it for a good period of time, and it just kind of, something hit us like, oh shit, this actually just might not happen. Which was fine, because we had other stuff going on and it wasn't the end of the world. But it was so funny how it's that exact week where we almost had that feeling that NFTs really clicked and started to gain more traction. You know, I'd been doing them for about 6 months previously, just doing crypto art, but I mean, it clicked in terms of the actual power of NFTs. I understood it. It took me about 6 months, and then I understood it better. And we both kind of had this red pill moment where we were like video calling each other, like, oh shit, this is how you do it. This is it. Like, and just kind of forgot about all that pain from the last few years. We're like, let's just focus on this. You know, we've made a conscious effort to not get it out too early. That's why it's coming out at this stage. But in those early periods in 2021, Broadside was a key focus in the first understanding NFTs. So we've bided our time. We've waited until it's right, and that's in terms of, like, you know, what's happening with crypto, but also the 10 years of making it. And yeah, like you say, it just feels like a perfect time and a perfect format to kind of come together on and put all of our energy into. So I really feel what you're saying there.
Oh, that's wicked, guys. And I'm so glad you guys are, our first official guests on STARKADE Radio, because your story mirrors ours, like, very, very closely, with having that, especially what you mentioned, Vector, there, that aha moment, because, and I think you and I have a similar trajectory, where I was creating, one of one crypto art and stuff, like late 2020, moving into 2021 and stuff. And, but it wasn't until we started seeing these PFP projects. I even hesitate to use the word or the phrase PFP projects, because they're not really that anymore. At least I don't kind of see them in that light. They're a new method of world building and storytelling, with an audience or a community that has ownership within that and can have a voice within that. I love He-Man and Masters of the Universe, but I sure as heck don't own anybody in that universe, and I have no control over what happens. But I love that. That's the new kind of frontier that we're on. And that aha moment, I think it happens to all of us. If we're storytellers, if we're creatives, if we want to build worlds and have wanted to our entire lives, this is the medium to do it in. And I don't care what company is eating in other companies or whatever the heck is going on right now. It's all about the storytelling, man. It's all about the world building. And that's one of the reasons I'm so stoked that Broadside is happening. And before I go into a little bit of I want to properly introduce Broadside as a project here. But Matt, thank you for mentioning that you worked with DC, because I was wondering why the hell there were so many bat people in our audience right now. And I was like, I don't know this many bat people, but here we are. So thanks for clearing that up, man. So everybody here, if you're joining us, you're joining us late. I just want to give a quick rundown, especially for the people that are here for STARKADE and aren't familiar with Broadside yet. Broadside is a 7,290 unique hero PFP project with unique names, features, and traits. I butchered that sentence. Sorry about that. Each, and correct me if I'm wrong after this, fellas, each hero has 11 episodic NFTs telling the story of your specific character. There are one-of-ones, legendaries, and rarity pulled from a total of 201 billion unique combinations. Okay, fellas, calm down a bit, okay? We're talking about full commercial rights here for most of the project. And one of the things that jumped out to me most on your website was this little sentence. I think it was down at the bottom of the page, and you guys wrote, "To help people understand and participate in the real and rapidly decentralizing world taking shape around us." Now, that is a great sentence, because that's exactly what I believe it was you, Matt, that said earlier about how, we're not at the point of mass adoption yet, because most of the people look at NFTs and are like, what the hell are these things, or monkey JPEGs, get out of here. But the real potential for what we're building is storytelling. It is world building and everything that you can put around that. So I wanted to ask you about one thing in particular. I got a little list of questions I wanted to talk to you guys about. But you can both field this. You both come from the music industry to some degree, either making music or working with music companies and that kind of thing. For Broadside, I believe I read there's going to be a musical component to that. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So there's kind of already if a lot of the people in the audience who are part of the Broadside community will know, there's already like a massive musical element of Broadside. In fact, music is the thing that we've done more than anything else leading up to launch. But in the story, music's had such a big influence on Vector and I, and the way it sort of shaped us as individuals and the cultures around us. And that's something that we really wanted to sort of weave into the story of Broadside. I guess I have to go, like, if you go back to like how Broadside, the story sort of came to be, that's sort of where the music element comes from. Really, it was we very much wanted to tell a story about what decentralization looks like at scale, but make it really fun and really embed it in a story that had its own world and its own culture and its own fashion and its own like way of talking, and definitely its own music. And we came up with this type of music in Broadside called 3D bass, which is this genre of music that's based on a lot of the music that sort of we came up on, a lot of the sort of bass heavy electronic music like dubstep and grime, but then things that came after it like drill and trap, and funky house and Baltimore house, and lots of this stuff that, it's just this always endlessly mutating kind of continuum of bass music that seems to reverberate around the world through different scenes and cultures. And we're like, well, what if that's like this thing in the future? Like we were thinking about long range acoustic devices, which are these crowd control weapons or crowd control technology that exists today. The one of the sort of main sort of examples I always cite for LRAD is if you've ever been to New York and heard a police siren suddenly start making a very low rumbling noise that seems to vibrate through your chest, that is an LRAD siren called a rumbler on an NYPD cop car. And that's like sound hitting you in the chest. And we're like, this is like a crowd control technique. All the technology in Broadside is existing technology. There's nothing that we made up. It's stuff that's real, but we're just like, well, how is it? Imagine this scaling. Like, how would it scale? And we started to think about, okay, well, we got like base weapons that the police use against crowds today. What if we use base against like the police and all the various entities pushing back against the heroes in Broadside? Like, what if music is a weapon and the people are using it to fight back? And so we came up with this music called 3D bass in the story, and it's a huge component of the Broadside story. But then if you like, we were thinking about, well, how are we going to do? What can we do on Twitter, and what can we do? And then Charlie, the third person we work with, started doing these pirate radio shows on Twitter, and he had the idea of like, why don't we just play all of the music that came before 3D bass, like all of the stuff that we grew up on, and like every show will be talking to the audience about the history of 3D bass. And so it lets us talk about different parts of culture that inspired us. And it lets us play music and have a lot of fun, which is, I've only listened to most of these spaces. I don't usually get there live a lot because I'm quite busy, but they're a lot of fun for the people that are there.
Holy hell, man. That's dope as hell. I had no idea that 3D bass was a thing. And I had, that's a component of world building that's incredible. Good work on coming up with that. That is also, man, a tagline: music is a weapon. Ooh, rhythm is a dancer. Man, sick as hell. So listen, that's actually a perfect that leads me into my question about the visual side of this, because obviously, like as you were talking, Matt, and you were telling us about the the background of that story, looking at the artwork vector, I mean, you clearly come from that world. This is like very dubsteppy bass grime. Can you talk a little bit about your influences as an artist? Like, I've been looking at your artwork, your NFTs. That's basically how I met you through the NFT scene. I met you briefly at NFT London last year, and I've always been marveled by your artwork, because it is just like I said earlier about your website. It just screams at you. There's so much going on, but it's a perfect marriage of like 2D and 3D kind of brought together. So I have a follow up to this question, but I'll ask the first one first. Who, growing up and stuff, who are your influences? Like, what other artists were you looking at, and were you like kind of mimicking anybody back in the day? Were you into comics, cartoons? What's that look like?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for asking that question, because this is something we haven't dived into yet. So I also think you're the perfect person to talk to about this, because yeah, definitely, like the 2D, 3D thing. I'm 3D artist predominantly, but there's just something about the 2D, 3D aesthetic I've just always preferred. I think it's because the problem with 3D is it's just so easy. If you try to achieve too much realism, it's just so easy for it to become outdated the next year when things kind of step up. If you look at movies 10 years ago that we used to think were amazing, and then you look at them a few years later, it's like, oh, wow, that's really not realistic. I can't believe, same with computer games, oh, I can't believe I thought GoldenEye was good graphics. But so there's something about 2D that I think if you add it on to the 3D, so it's still like quite, high-end 3D in terms of render engine, but then there's a 2D aesthetic to it. To me, it just helps it not age as quickly, which, yeah, like I just feel that's the biggest problem with 3D, I find. So, I mean, in terms of inspirations, James, I would honestly say, your art's been a big inspiration in many ways. I was definitely a product of that kind of maybe I want to say like 2007 onwards, computer arts magazine type wave of designers. Like that was when I started really getting into, I guess, character design. Although character design was something I struggled with, but definitely your aesthetic in terms of that, that retro future movement, which I feel that you were kind of a pivotal figure in. Those early Tron posters, that kind of stuff, like that you did specifically, but obviously a lot of people then mimicked and took on various directions. But that retro future aesthetic was something I always loved, because again, it's like you're blending two things, like the futuristic aspect of something, but then there's something about it which is a bit dated in some ways. So it gives you that contrast in the same way that I like about the 2D and the 3D. So yeah, I think I do definitely look at a lot more, or I resonate with a lot more 2D styled stuff when I'm going through that process. But specifically in terms of character design, because this is how I look at this project, character design was like my original love, but I just always like struggled with it. It was always the thing, I studied animation at university, and I would do short films with character-led type weird little characters, often influenced by this, when that street art movement kicked off, when vinyl toys were a big thing. Again, like 2007-ish, that kind of time, but maybe slightly before actually. That was probably more 2004 till 2010. But the way that street art characters all of a sudden came alive, like graffiti characters, but they were on these products, like, and those products were sculptures, and they were high-end art in many ways. Like, Cause was a product of that. The artist Cause, he started in that vinyl toy movement and just kind of excelled past everyone. But I guess the vinyl toy thing isn't as popular now, but I don't know if you remember back then, it was so big, like Kid Robot, Medicom, all of those kind of companies I was just obsessed with. So yeah, around about that time I was obsessed with character design, struggled with it, would make short films, would be inspired by that kind of street art movement, but also like the retro future movement. But to be honest, I left character design for a few years because I just felt like, I just couldn't. I went down the more abstract route. So I started doing more, when I was doing club visuals, you can't really do like cute little characters. So I went kind of more abstract, edgy, dubstep artwork, dubstep graphics, that kind of stuff. Until recent years, I revisited character design, actually pretty much during the pandemic. And from the place when I said, we're developing all this intellectual property, me and Matt were trying to shop it around Hollywood or shop it around streaming studios. And I don't just mean Broadside. I mean, there's actually a bunch of things we're setting on, both independently and together, that kind of, all that development work tends to kind of go on behind the scenes rather than in public. So I was more working with illustrators and concept artists. And I just got to a point, and especially with Broadside, where we were looking at the art and we're just like, and I was going to conferences as well. Like I was going to a lot of animation conferences, like industry ones, like Kid Screen, and just trying to look at like, what people are doing and, where you kind of need to be aiming if you want to do a big production in either gaming or film. And I just got to the point in the pandemic where I was like, well, I used to like character design. The character designs don't look right for all this IP we're building, like Broadside. I'm just going to have to just sit down and just get into it again. Like, I'm just going to start back at scratch. I'm going to read books. I read a really good book called Stop Staring. It's called something longer, but Stop Staring. It basically talks about the basics of like facial modeling and expressions, and how to model well for expressions. Again, like these are all the things I found hardest. Like character modeling, facial modeling, character rigging. That's kind of why I left it for almost 10 years, because I found it too painful. But that's why, it's good that you say that, the way you see the artwork, because in some ways, like that's the thing I'm most happy with in Broadside. Is like I finally got over that thing that had been, holding me back for so many years in terms of loving character design, but never really being able to do it in a way that I was happy with. But then I've kind of feel like I've gone through the full cycle journey where I've kind of like tied it in with all the dubstep aesthetics and all that stuff when I was my more kind of abstract period of VJ and music and stuff. And yeah, and obviously that ties together perfectly with the story. And then it still has the kind of futuristic aspect to it. And yeah, that's quite a long answer, but that's where we are today, and that's where we are now. So it's kind of a journey of pain and doubting myself, and then things coming together, and the pandemic and that time, just having more time to really just get back on top of it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that answer, Vector. Once again, like that's something that's mirrored in my own life. Well, first of all, thank you very much for that kind shout out and referencing my Tron posters and stuff. And in light of going out on a high note, we're gonna wrap things up. Thanks for dropping in, everybody. No, I'm just no, in terms of character design, I relate to that so much because when you're a creative kid or whatever, and you're going through school and you want to get into the creative industry to some degree. You have to kind of weigh what you want to do versus what earns money. And if you're somebody that's interested in character design, that is a very, very difficult industry to break into, right? And this is again where the convergence of NFTs brought out a lot of this for a lot of people like us, because I was the exact same way. I wanted to design characters, I wanted to build worlds, but making websites is an easier way to earn money, so that's what I ended up doing. And so that's beautiful to hear that, doing a project like this kind of rekindled your love with character illustration and actually made you, buckle down and figure out how to do it. Because again, I had to do the exact same thing with STARKADE characters. All of our megastars are my characters, but I had to redesign them and really bring them into, well, I designed them way back in 1987, believe it or not, but, I had to bring them into 2022. And to do that, I had to learn basically how to do character design and how to draw characters that were, usable and could actually move, which is, a lot more difficult than it sounds. So that's amazing. That's really cool. And referencing goddamn Kid Robot, like that didn't occur to me until you said it. Like, oh, of course, looking at the Broadside characters, they would make perfect vinyl toys, man. So, when vinyl toys, fellas. But no, that's an incredible influence to have, because I was there for Kid Robot, man. I'm sure you have that. I heart plastic, or I love plastic, whatever that book is that Kid Robot put out, outlining street toys and street art and stuff. Awesome. Yeah, really cool stuff. So and this kind of leads again into my next question. When you guys decided, okay, you had that aha moment and you decided you were going to do Broadside or whatever the working title was at the time, how did you guys form sort of the idea for the world that you wanted to work on? That must have been kind of a tennis game back and forth of figuring out, like, this would be a cool idea, that would be a cool idea, and then trying to marry it with the style and stuff. What did that process look like for the both of you? Like at the beginning of trying to figure out what you wanted to do?
Beth, should I start? You want to start?
I think you start, because I think the story is a good place to start.
Yeah, so Broadside started with the story, and it was I wrote a book called The Pirate's Dilemma in 2008, which was like a non-fiction book about using piracy as or thinking about sort of how culture affects wider society and how things like piracy affect us. And we definitely got into like the history of street art and a lot of things in that book. And definitely Vector and I, like, Vector was a huge contributor of feedback and editing and thoughts on that book. And it was all stuff that we loved. And after that, Penguin hit me up and said they were doing a book of short stories, and Barack Obama was writing this big short story for them. It was going to be called Generation Activist, and they said, we want to get other writers to contribute short stories to this book. You just had a lot of success with pirates. Why don't you write a story about piracy in the future? And I was like, oh shit, I love that. And I'd had this like story in my head for a while, like about these kids in this army of robots, and I didn't really have a framework around it. And maybe it was a game. I didn't know what it was. It was just this sort of thing I was noodling on. I was like, oh yeah, it's that. Like, it's that. Let's do that. And started writing it. And then Barack Obama decided before he got elected, it probably wasn't a good idea for mainstream America if he'd just put out a book called Generation Activist. So he didn't do the book. So Penguin just said, oh yeah, don't worry, the book's not happening. gave, the contracts got torn up. But now I had this like little short story about piracy in the future in this world. And then it just went through all these iterations on the story side. Like it went, DreamWorks asked if we could develop it as a screenplay, and we did that. And then it was in various studios and production places, and then would always get to a point where it's like, okay, we love it, but like, oh shit, this is like a $300 million movie, and you guys aren't like, you're not George Lucas. We can't do this. So all right, never mind. And then the more like Charlie and Vector and I were getting into it, like, well, if the main character, if no one knows who the main character is, and they're completely decentralized, if the character is decentralized, then everyone's really going to understand like what, because it's really heady stuff, right? Like decentralization. Like, what does that mean? That's not something most people are thinking about. That's not like, like that's a weird conversation to start with someone. So how do you make this into a fun story was always really important to us. So we started, the world was sort of there on the page for a long time, and it went through different iterations, and it was always very like, there's like a real tension and attitude. There's a lot of violence, a lot of heartbreak in the story, and a lot of catharsis at the end of it. And not to spoil it, but there was just a lot there that was, I was like, Charlie and I were really trying to get down on the page. But then when Vector started turning it into art, and I'll turn it over to him, because like where we've got to with it now is like, I think we sort of got it 10 miles, and then Vector took it another million in terms of how he interpreted the story. And really, because he's been, we've been friends for 20 years, and he knew where this was all coming from. It's like, no, this is the rave scene. This is dubstep. This is resistance. This is the history of counterculture. But how do you translate that into this bright solar punk future that's not dystopian, but it's still like as violent and crazy as fuck? And how do you make that work? And the way he did it was, I want to hear this answer, because I still don't understand how he did such an amazing job. It's going to writing something and then seeing an artist like Vector interpret that was just like, it's amazing for me and Charlie to see.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me was, definitely the starting point was, we're definitely aligned in terms of, values and concepts. So, we've worked in this way in the past, where Matt's written something, and then I've been like, right, I think I can add a dimension to this with animation or graphics or some kind of digital aspect, and that worked quite well. But it was always that inception, like the idea I just resonated with, and I think I could run with it. And that was very much, what this was about. I knew he was working on it. I'd always check in. I'd always see if I could fit in some kind of way. So there's always that synergy in terms of, we both come to the same place. We like the same kinds of things, the counterculture aspect, the piracy aspect, the music aspect. But there was something that really switched in recent years for me, where it honestly became more of something that it's almost like a sickness that had to get out. Like I felt really compelled that this story had to get out, just because of the nature, the solar punk aspect, really. There's so many things in the world that you can see, and they're almost like, oh, this could go down a strange or a bad or a dystopian route. But I feel like this type of science fiction is needed, like these kind of positive stories that give you visions for the future that aren't just kind of like AI killing everybody, or all that kind of stuff we've been exposed to in the last few decades. So there was something about it where I was like, well, this hasn't been done before. I like all the concepts already, but there's something about it where it's like, yeah, it just needs to be out there. So the work that I did, a lot of it just came from like this nagging feeling that I had to do it. Basically, there was nothing I didn't really have a choice, and that's definitely the frame of mind I've been in of these past, I guess, this sprint that we just did in the past 6 months to really get it across the finish line. I just kind of really drew from that energy of like, this needs to be out. This can't not go out. It's the perfect time for it to go out. We've literally almost finished it. All it involves is just me really sitting down and focusing non-stop for 6 months. I thought it'd actually be 2 months, actually, but we're sitting here now 6-7 months down the line. But I thought it would be like 2 months, get out the door, done. But that didn't happen. But yeah, it honestly just came from that, just that original inspiration, really resonating with the core messages, but then also just feeling a real sense of urgency that now was the time on different levels.
Awesome, man. I totally agree, man. It is the perfect time for a project like Broadside to come out. God, I got so many questions after you guys give every answer. It's crazy. But first of all, just kind of piggybacking off of what you said about everything is dystopian. AI like eating humans or whatever. That is seemingly exactly where we are right now. Not so much in just with PFP projects, everybody wants to do the dystopian cyberpunk thing, which is fine, which is totally cool. You can get lots of good visuals out of that. But I identify with you guys a lot because I'm an optimist. I like bright colors. I like fun characters and that sort of thing. So it's really cool that you guys are taking sort of the optimistic view and keeping those bright colors. I mean, Vector, I had no doubts that you would be pursuing bright colors. But having that optimistic view is a big deal. And it reminds me of let's go back to George Lucas for a second. There's a special like documentary that came out. I can't remember when, like 10 years ago or something like that. And they did sort of a little mini preamble of the making of Star Wars, like leading up to the 1977 release. And they were talking about how the 1970s were mired in this almost like darkness. It did feel very dystopian. They were coming out of like the Nixon era and a lot of the bad things that there was economic issues and things in the 70s, and and that reflected in movies at the time. There was Earthquake. There was a bunch of things like Network and things. Really, really kind of like negative, bad, good ideas, but dark, like a lot of darkness going on. And it wasn't until Star Wars that it gave everybody a breath. It gave everybody a little ray of sunshine that, things are okay. The good guys can win and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, it feels really good to be talking to you guys about that sort of an outlook, and I do believe you and agree with you that this is the right time for Broadside to come out. If that's your core values, that's amazing. And you mentioned solar punk a couple of times, and solar punk is a term that, that is actually a part of Starkade in a small way. We're kind of talking about how to incorporate a specific character into the solarpunk fold, being cautious about it, obviously. But how does the solarpunk? How does that idea? How did you first hear about the solarpunk movement, and how does that wrap into the Broadside storyline?
I can definitely, I can talk about how I sort of first came across solarpunk. Maybe Betty, I don't know if you got a different story, but it actually did go back to the art of Broadside. Like there was definitely the stuff that was resonating with us growing up. A lot of street art, a lot of graffiti, a lot of the early like Bear Brick and Medicom stuff was all there. But I think one thing for me I remember when I was trying to describe the world in Broadside, there's a picture by an artist called Chiho Aoshima, who's part of like the super flat movement. She's one of the proteges of Takeshi Murakami. Like I've always been a big collector of Murakami's work, but there's this one piece and I love like the super flat. Like Murakami's thing is, I try to draw a world that's really happy, because I don't understand what that means. Like he feels like he's so enmeshed in darkness and sadness that when he tries to draw happy, that's why his stuff looks a bit like. That's why it doesn't just look like kids' paintings. That's why it is a bit like fucked up and crazy. And Chiyo Aoshima has this one piece called City Lights, and she took over an underground station in London with it. Like this is like 20 years ago, and that's where I first saw it. And it's all these buildings, and they're kind of alive, and they look like they're like, it's like biological skyscrapers, but like they're very clean, sort of cartoonish. But they had that super flat, like there's something dark about this, and it's not just this like utopian everything's going to be all right when we figure out climate change. It's we're going to get beyond our problems now, but we're still going to be human. And the world's still going to be scary, and there's still going to be conflict and tension. And there was all this stuff in that painting that it was very much sort of front of mind when I started to sort of try and describe what the world looked like in Broadside. But then there's been so many, like, I'm glad you brought up Star Wars. Like, I think George Lucas was really the first person, or working with the concept artist. I can't remember his name, on those first eight pieces of art they did for Star Wars. It's like, the future has to look fucked up. Like, the Millennium Falcon has to look like a hoopty. Like, that's what spaceships should look like. It's going to be rusty and messed up and beat up. And that was sort of important. It's been an important part of how Broadside looks. And yeah, just this, and then going back to like, like flyer design and stuff. Like Vector came up designing during sort of like the grime period and garage, but before that, like flyer design in the like late 80s, early 90s. If you go and look at old flyer designs for raves like Dreamscape, a lot of this stuff that was happening in the UK, it's literally a blueprint for the metaverse. Like, it's this utopian vision. It's all the same grid lines and the blues and pinks and the low poly mountains, and then these like happy characters dancing. And like, we grew up going in record shops, like collecting these flyers and sticking them on our walls, and just like looking at these images and soaking them in. Like, so there's so many examples, and all of that stuff to me, like that early 90s rave, that feeling of we're going to change the world. We've got all the tools we need to do it. We can do this. We can beat this shit. And we fucking didn't do it yet. And to me, that's where solarpunk comes in. It's like, no, we need to remember that actually we can do that. And we need to put that vision, like, aesthetically in front of a lot of people and say, look, this is a world we can get to. And it's not going to be perfect. And we're going to have to fight as hard as we can for it. But it's there. Like, we can do this. And I think that's a very different subtext from a lot of the dystopian stuff, which I love, but it's just a completely different message. And I think that's what Vector and I were like, yeah, we've got to get this out now, because the world needs these solarpunk stories like this. We need to be challenged on this level to kind of have a different goal, because there's just not a lot of optimism out there.
Yeah, 100%. And I would also add on to that, in terms of the solarpunk as a genre, almost where it's failed up until now is maybe just focusing purely on painting positive pictures. But I think the thing about Broadside is it paints a more full picture that has that duality to it. And I actually think it's the piracy aspect to it, and the stuff we talked about earlier, like music as a weapon, that adds that contrast. It adds that kind of grittiness that kind of really complements the solarpunk aspect. And what Matt was saying about the flyers, I think that's, again, like, bedroom walls for teenagers in a certain period of time were just full of these flyers. And I was definitely one of those people. Matt was one of those people. I'm sure some of the people in this room also had that. But there was just, a certain style that was like a counterculture movement. It was my access to art and design. That was the first time I saw art and design that I resonated with. And it was just these throwaway leaflets in record shops. So they just plastered my walls. But yeah, that whole era, again, it was very optimistic. The way it talked about the future, the way it talks about consciousness, it didn't have so much of these dystopian undertones. It was almost, and this was pre-internet, so it was almost like as soon as the internet came along, that whole thing almost got lost. It didn't really make it to be documented as well on the internet. It's documented a bit, but just not on the same level. You have to kind of seek it out. So almost what I think we're doing here is almost like a remembering, of these things that originally inspired us, and then maybe the past decade or couple of decades, things got a bit squiffy and our attention's gone elsewhere, but it's kind of returning back to that original point of inspiration, of what inspired us to kind of start these creative journeys. And, using the technology we have now, the creative tools we have now, everything about our creative journeys, like the connections we have now, to then really kind of go back to that message and stand on the shoulders of those people who are trying to get that across, and really try to find a way to push it, to a next level of attention and awareness.
Oh, guys, I love it. I love that you brought up the connection between, Broadside and solarpunk and the damn rave flyer movement. Because, man, we were all there, like over in Canada. I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada, on the East Coast. And we were about, 7, 8 years behind you guys over here. We didn't have a Manchester, unfortunately, but 7, 8 years later, that's when the rave scene kind of broke in my hometown. And it was the exact same thing. I would go to the record shops, every week or whatever, to check out the flyer rack to see if there was any new flyers. And I used to collect them. When you collect them, you notice styles and the different styles. And then you start looking at, designed by whoever. Then you start seeing the same names and you build up this little network of artists. And then you might actually have the good fortune of meeting some of these people that you look up to. So I love, just from a nostalgia point alone, I love that you guys made that connection, because, man, if you're an artist around that time, you definitely have that in your blood, especially if you're into music at the time, right? So I can't believe that an hour has gone by. I told you guys in the DM that I want to keep this to 30 minutes, but you guys are dope as hell, so we managed to stretch it to an hour. But listen, before we wrap up, I got a little preamble that I can do following this. But what is the essential information? So you guys have a mint date of November 15th, which is coming up in 6 days or something like that. For the audience here and for the STARKADE crew, for the Broadside crew, what's the essential information people should know heading into November 15th?
Yeah, sure. So November 15th, Broadside drops. We're taking over OpenSea that day. So it'll be right there on the homepage from Monday the 14th. And then it's going to drop probably, I think, 12 p.m. Eastern. We're still sort of getting the final time from the OpenSea crew. The price on mint is going to be 0.07 ETH plus gas for a broadsider. There's 7,290 of them. There's definitely, an allow list and the forward list and some. We're expecting some traffic for sure. But there should be some in public sale, so please do get in there if you can. Our pre-mint list is still open. If you hit Broadside Twitter, it's right there in our bio, and you can get on the pre-mint list. That we're going to keep that open all the way to the drop. And then over the next weeks and months, we're going to drop you, after you get your broadsider will come with a one-of-one generated name, and we're going to drop you the 11 chapters of the story of Broadside, part 1 of Broadside, with your character named as the hero throughout. Once you've got all 11 chapters plus a few other artifacts, we're going to drop you along the way from the world that sort of expand on different elements of the story. You'll be able to merge and burn those chapters. Not your PFP, you can keep that forever, and you've got the full commercial rights to that. Or it's CC0 if it's got CC0 elements from other artists like Xcopy and Gremplin and Electric Method and some of the people we collaborated on there. We didn't even get into that stuff, but I'll leave that for now. You can read about that on our website. But yeah, you're going to have to merge and burn these chapters into a book NFT with your broadsider on the cover of the book, with your broadsider as the hero throughout the story. You'll be able to print real copies of that book. You'll be able to download and share copies of that book. You'll be able to sell copies of that book. What we want to do is try and get 7,290 copies, or however many people do this, thousands of different versions of Broadside all on sale on the same day, and see if we can hack the bestseller lists with this crazy decentralized Web3 book project, and really kind of bring this into a very Web2. I mean, publishing's not even caught up with Web1 yet. How do we go and impact a completely different creative medium using what we've done together in Broadside, and put this story about decentralization in this larger forum at the end of the project, and have a bit of fun doing it. So that's the sort of big idea. That's all of phase 1. We've got some other phases behind that with Broadside that we're working on that we haven't announced anything on. But yeah, that's everything you can expect. It's going to be a fun journey.
Awesome. Anything to add there, Vector?
That was a perfect simplified overview of what we're doing. So no, but the only other thing we're doing until then is we're doing pirate radio sessions on Twitter Spaces every so often. We've got a good one coming up on Sunday with Eclectic Methods, done a special guest mix. And yeah, we'll just be continuing to do that to find ways to build out this story in different avenues, because the pirate radio sessions and all these different things are definitely also part of the story, which will make more sense as the book kind of rolls out. So there's different access points for people to leverage their rights in different ways they could do that. This is all these different things are the sandbox, and we just kind of create a platform to people to use their avatar and exploit the rights to as much as they can. So yeah, that's all I'd say.
Awesome. Well, one of the mantras of STARKADE the entire time is that we really wanted to put focus on world building and storytelling and all that kind of stuff. And it's been an absolute thrill to talk to you guys, because that is clearly like the center point of your project. So hats off to you guys, and thank you so much for being here for this Spaces. I could talk to you guys for another 3 hours, man. We got a lot of nostalgia to get through. So yeah, maybe we meet up again sometime, and we do something like this in the future. I'm just going to do a little bit of preamble, and then I'll wrap up, and we can do any last words or whatever. So next week on STARKADE Radio is going to be our story session, as I said earlier. Hopefully we're going to have our lead narrative writer, John, on here talking about the story, the world of STARKADE, and all the lore and rich character development that he's done. Drop by the STARKADE Discord. Shouts to all the STARKADians that are listening right now, that are hanging out in the audience. If you want to get involved in STARKADE, just grab a fighter off the secondary. They're real affordable. Swing by STARKADE.com for all the info on what we've done and where we're going. Connect to our wallet, or connect your wallet to STARKADE.com. You can check out your dashboard. That is going to be your shareable recruiter profile as of next week. Equip your fighter, get them into training, earn STARKADE credits, and get the jump ahead of our big Legion Arena game that will be launching coming up. That's our next step. So once again, and I guess this is a big point that I never mentioned yet. Broadside has been kind enough to give us about 50 allow list spots for their drop coming up on the 15th. Drop by the STARKADE Discord. That's discord.gg/STARKADE. And check out the community there for the earliest access available spots. I messed that up, but all the info will be on our Discord really soon. I read that sentence in the complete opposite way that I should have. But listen, guys, best of luck with Broadside. I love everything that you're doing. The design, the music, the characters, the story. You guys really got it where it counts, man. And we're living through some weird times at the moment, and we need those rays of sunshine, and you guys are clearly that. So best of luck with everything that you're doing. If you guys haven't checked out Broadside, check out the website. That's Broadside BR0ADS1DE.com. You sons of bitches. Broadside.com to check out everything that they're doing and where they're going. It's a brilliant project, and you will be happy. Your eyeballs will thank you. It's a weird thing to say to cap off that sentence, but that's where we are. Fellas, Vector, Matt, thank you so much for being here. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you guys. If you want to do any plugs to wrap things up, heck, give it a shout.
No plugs, but I'm just incredibly happy to have learned that you also come from inspired from the same fly design world, because I can just see that in your artwork so much. So that's just given me some amazing context. So yeah, thank you. This has been a great chat, and it's great to really get kind of drilled down on all these kind of creative aspects of things, because we haven't spoke about any of these things. We spoke about View on Spaces just yet. So thank you for your amazing questions.
Yeah, thank you, James. Just appreciate you having us here, and big up to all the STARKADE crew. Thank you.
Oh, guys, it's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for being here. And just to wrap things up, and I should have said this earlier. I listen to some Spaces, and they're always talking about the metrics and floors and all that stuff. So it's an absolute breath of fresh air to talk about the creativity behind this stuff, because that's what I'm interested in. That's what you guys are interested in, and I know there's a lot of people out there that are interested in that same stuff. The nuts and bolts of creative process that drives a lot of our lives. So it's been an absolute pleasure, fellas. Thank you again for being here, and thank you all in the audience for being here as well. It was a pleasure seeing so many bat people coming in here and listening to everything that we had to say. So thank you very much to all those Broadsiders, all those STARKADians, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to all fight against one another and punch each other in the face, or wherever the hell our projects are going to be going. So thank you again, gang. This has been STARKADE Radio, episode 2, and I will see you next week at the same time, right here, 3 p.m. UK. And give us a follow at STARKADE World on Twitter to get all of the latest news and updates. So have a great rest of your day, gang. And I will see you all again soon. Stay rad.
What's up?